Hello everybody, this is Al Souza, otherwise known as Fuzzypup Online. This is part 2 of my video series called Connecting the Mind and the Body. In this sequence we're going to examine the psychological part of this pyramid, what I call the poker pyramid that was introduced in my discipline video. So, psychology. A lot of people undervalue it at the table. You shouldn't, because it is a very important factor, especially when playing at a casino. So let's take a look at what is table psychology. This is what I call it. I define it as mental manipulation and observation of your opponents to gain information and adjust their behavior and actions in your favor. Well, what that basically means is translating into changing how your opponents do things and what they see so you can make more money. So we're going to hit this right from online poker, because this is very, very simple with online poker. Very few of the hands online involve psychology. There are really no tells. There's nothing that you can go by. There's nothing that you can see. All it is a person clicking something, and there's 50,000 different things that can interfere with how fast he clicks or does anything, or things that he types. You can't take anything for granted. But there are a few things that you could that you can use from psychology. If you find a player that is multi-tabling a lot, like playing 10, 12, 16 tables, the chances are that he's going to generally bluff a lot less. He's not going to be focusing on you really specifically unless something in your pattern really, really comes out that he notices and adjusts. Forums are a good way to get a read on people. If you know a certain player, you know what he's posting on 2+2 or other forums, and let's say that he's having problems or troubles with playing, you could possibly identify some leaks in his game and exploit them. Read his hand postings, read his emotions from his postings, start identifying like long streaks of winning or losing. Use poker table ratings to find out how these people are doing, and you might get an edge up on them. Even consider maybe looking at how he's doing in a current session at other tables, if you have the time, depending on how many tables you play, to see how well he is doing. So this is basically the only way that you can get a read on somebody using psychology. It comes in so infrequent, it almost doesn't matter, but in some cases it does. I knew a player that had some family issues, and he was tilting like crazy, and other rigs picked up on it. Now, about yourself. If you are part of, if you like to post on 2+2 or Card Runners or any of the other places, be careful when you post your hands. Only post your hands in a vacuum. Post the hand itself just how it is. Don't put any emotion into it, any thought. Don't say, well, I would do this and I would do that and this is how I would play it, blah, 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 blah. Because that gives away how you play. Don't reveal your thinking. The best thing that you can do instead of posting on forums is to get a poker strategy group together. Usually people that are mixed range, some worse, some better. Teaching is one of the ways that you always train yourself, and sometimes the worst player will actually come up with a situation and you're like, wow, that's really interesting, how would I handle this? And by helping him, you actually help yourself. And of course, better players always have better input than you in a poker strategy group. It also limits you to your exposure to what your strategies are. It's especially good if let's say your group is in different cities. Like my poker group, everybody's in different cities, so I will never run into them. They're a live poker group for the most part, but some of them do play online. So post your hands in a vacuum when you're on the forum. Don't put any emotions into it. Don't put who your hand is. Don't put how you feel, what you this, what you that. You can put descriptions of the villains, but remove your personality from the game, or from the post. So that's about it for online poker. So let's move on to what the juice of this video is about, and that is live poker. Okay, live poker. Many of the hands that you play in live poker will involve psychology. Now I know that there will be some of you that think this is all hogwash, you're all math players, everything's game theory. There's a lot more to poker than just math. So let's go down the list here that I'm talking about. First of all, be prepared to play. Watch my discipline video, and that way you could prepare your brain, which is a giant computer, to be 100% efficient when you go to play poker. Second thing is, arrive early to go by the card room. Talk to the floor man if you have it in good with him. There are actually some very good videos by a player, I forgot what his name is, it's Missed Something or Something Missed, on Card Runners that deal with exactly this type of issue of how to get in good with the floor man and get invited to the good games, and he'll call you when things are when the high stakes games have big whales in them. So this is actually pretty important. Listen and encourage talk to gain information. If you get there early, you're waiting for a table, talk to other players around that are regs or that are just people that you always play with. Gain information from them. There's always things to learn. You learn how they play, you learn what their mood is, you learn how they're feeling, you learn if they're leaving, if they're coming, how much money they have. I mean, there's just so much just by talking to them. And of course, try not to reveal any. Be positive and make sure that your life is always great. Everything is fantastic. There are no issues and no problems. Do not talk about your problems. Do not talk about strategy. And for God's sake, do not talk that you play online poker at a casino. That scares people sometimes, or they will change how they play against you. You want to come in there with a positive attitude saying, hey, how's it going today? Hey, it's going fantastic. And then you just start a social conversation with them, and you will pick up information from them. Always be friendly. Always being friendly keeps you in a very positive state, keeps those good chemicals being generated in your brain to keep your brain efficient and flowing. You also want other people liking you. It gains favor sometimes. You get a bit of information on a certain player. They might be willing to share. You can share some information back on somebody else. Don't share information about yourself, or at least try not to. So always be friendly. It's very important to do this. It's good for yourself, and it's good for the environment. Poker is a social game. Live poker is a social game. Other people's ego. Everyone absolutely loves to talk about themselves. So listen to the bad beat stories, ask questions on how they think. I had a game in North Carolina that I played in once where this bad player made a horrendous set of plays, and on the river I was like, how on earth could this guy call? I mean, he can't be simply this bad. So I just started asking questions like, wow, why did you call? This guy check raised you. You know, it's obviously he had a big hand, blah, 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 blah. So I went down a list of lines. And when he answered me, he looked at me like I was an idiot. And he basically said I had top pair. And even though I might have looked a little bit foolish, I got information on this guy. This guy is just basically just a calling station. He just calls a top pair. There's absolutely no way that I could bluff this man just by his response to the questions I asked about the hand he just played. And he ended up winning, ironically. But this gave me an insight to this player, and I will now know never, ever, ever to bluff this guy if I ever run across him again. Of course, it's highly doubtful. I'm now in California. Psychology applies to casino management also, casino considerations. The better you treat them, the better they treat you. Now, before you start rolling your eyes or saying anything, let's go down the list and we'll talk about what some of you are thinking right now at the end. General behaviors. Get noticed by being extra polite and kind. Be kind to everybody. Get to know the staff. Lighten up their day. Say something that you know, maybe if they're a little bit depressed or upset or distracted, that'll make them feel better. Be generous when tipping. And by this, I don't mean like if a waitress gives you an $8 sandwich, give her $20. But if it's leaning like, you know, I either tip her $1 or $2, then lean on the $2. Lean toward the 20%. It's only $1 more or maybe $2 more. Lean on the higher end because she will notice, wow, this guy tipped me an extra $1. And she'll pay attention to this. Never, ever, ever be nasty for a mistake. Be forgiving. Because if the mistake happens, there's no way to fix it. You know, don't get mad at a dealer. Don't get mad at the player. Don't get mad at anybody. So it doesn't help. So always be nice. Waitresses, if you are nice to them, if you tip them just a little bit more, be generous, they will get service to you faster instead of you waiting. Come on. Some of you guys know that at a poker table, you could wait sometimes half an hour just to get a waitress to come over. They will also go the extra distance with special orders and make exceptions. Be super nice to them. And, you know, maybe they won't spit in your food. Who knows? I don't know what they do. Sometimes some people, anyways. Dealers. They will stop you from making mistakes, and they'll be on your side if a debate is really close. If you are nice to them and you're friendly, don't blame them. I've had dealers that I'm especially nice to, and they see that I'm going to bet out of turn, and they put their hand over near me, and they say, "Hold on, it's not your turn yet," and that probably saved me some money. I've had other dealers where they like me, and they say, "Hey, Al, cover your cards." Oh, yeah, so I put a chip on it or whatever, and they're being friendly, but they know that I'm nice to them. They understand that I'm a good player. They understand that I'm making a living. They understand I'm not going to tip them $10 in a $200 pot. I'm going to tip them regular, but I will tip them always, unless it's a tiny pot. They understand all this. But just being kind and courteous to these people makes a world of difference, because you got to remember the typical players that's out there, and let's say 1-2 live or 2-5 live, they are unbelievably rude to the dealers usually. Quite a few of them. So imagine dealing for like 6 hours a day and having to deal with these people all the time. If you're that one piece of sun that stands out in their day and makes them happy, you will be noticed. Floor man. Be nice to the floor man. You could either give him some tips at the end of the day if you have a great winning session. He could put you at the top of the list. He could put you as a favorite. He could tell you which tables have good players to go on and not good players to go on. He could get a selected table that you request for and put you at the top, to put you on there. There's a lot of things a floor man can do. He can also help you during debate, during the hand. And if there's a situation with another player, he will lean toward favoring you. But this is assuming this is a casino that you go at every single day or most of the time. So consider these things. Now, let's answer that question. Probably a lot of you were saying, does it really matter? Do they give a crap? Well, some yes, some no. I mean, if you see a waitress that you're dealing with or a dealer, no matter what you do, they don't care. Well, still be nice to them. You should. But let's say even if doing these things helps only 10% of the time, it still helps. So let's give an example. You have a waitress that likes you, and she gets your food really fast. Well, because she gets your food really fast, your brain doesn't go into a slow thinking process, and that causes you not to mess up a hand because she got your food earlier than she should have. Now you might, whatever, this doesn't mean anything. But yes, it does. I've had situations where I got hungry, I forgot I ordered food, the waitress forgot, and I messed up a hand because my brain was basically drained. I didn't have any energy, I didn't think the hand through. It makes a difference. These are many, many, many unseen factors that you don't notice, but they play a key part in you winning the live casino. Also, being nice keeps you in a positive frame of mind, which of course you should know from my previous video, that this keeps the positive chemicals flowing into your brain, keeps you happy, keeps you thinking, and removes tilt or prevents tilt or at least lowers tilt. The other thing is, this develops and establishes good social behaviors. Believe me, you want people liking you. At least this is my opinion. You want people liking you. You want people to be your friend. You don't have to super be their friend, but just be polite and nice. You want them liking you. You want them playing soft. You want them telling you everything about themselves. This is all information for your game, and every piece of information that you get is more money. Acts of kindness and generosity compensate far more than they cost, and I truly believe that. So be nice, tip a little more, be a little generous, be forgiving of mistakes. It will pay off. You might not see it, but believe me, it does. I've experienced it. Now we're going to hit the Mojo Factor, which is something that I spoke about in my first video. So I put 3 definitions that you guys can review up there. The third one is my definition. When your Mojo Factor is high, hitting big hands all the right place, forcing mistakes, and only showing nuts. You are riding that heater. You are on a super wave of cards. The deck is hitting you in the face, and nobody knows what to do. That is a positive and high Mojo Factor. So, when Mojo Factor is high, usually, this is what happens. Players can't figure you out, good players. Because they expect you to play a certain way, a certain style, suddenly you get hit in the face with a deck of cards, everything starts going your way. They're like, wow, has this guy changed? Is he playing loose? Is he playing tight? Is he doing this? Is he doing that? Is he bluffing? He can't possibly be winning this many hands. What should I do? They start trying to figure you out, and they might adjust their play in the wrong direction. Players will think you're lucky, and this applies to bad players. When players start thinking that you're lucky, they start folding. They think that that everything is going your way. There's a lot of players that are superstitious out there. So pay attention. Bluffing is more successful. You can get away with murder versus certain players. You frustrate them to keep folding. You frustrate them to keep folding. But in reality, you got the nuts. So maybe you could play a few more hands, steal a little bit more. They are now fearful of you. Opponents will play predictable. Human beings naturally are afraid of the unknown. That is why kids are afraid of the dark. I mean, they naturally are. There's no reason for it. I never told my son about monsters in the dark or anything like that, but he's naturally afraid of the dark. People are afraid of the unknown. So when you start winning and your Mojo Factor is really high, they don't know what to do. They have no idea. So they play very, very carefully. they will play predictable against you. They will bluff you less, unless you see somebody obviously going on monkey tilt versus you, and then they would bluff more. But in general, they're going to bluff you less. They're going to play very predictable. When your Mojo Factor is high, your winnings go up, and you should be able to exploit the table more. But be very careful, because one form of tilt is overconfidence. Playing too many hands, thinking that you could do whatever this, you're riding this way, blah, blah, blah. Don't get into overconfidence. Just still stay focused on your game and pay attention. Now, let's look at the other way. What happens when your Mojo Factor is low and everything is going the wrong way? Players will think they figured you out. Good players will. They see you folding, they see you doing this, they see you doing that, like, hey, so they start adjusting their strategy again. Now, when the Mojo Factor is low, obviously you're starting to tilt. You're starting to worry about yourself. The unknown comes into play. Is it me? Is it them? You know, and low Mojo Factor could also be that somebody else is hitting cards against you, or you have a particular bad player at your table that just keeps hitting one hand after the other on you, and and you can't beat them. And so things start going in the reverse direction. And let's say that basically the hands that you're playing are mostly against this guy and everybody else is noticing. So it can be that too, or you're just running bad. Running card dead is a completely different story. It's kind of, you're just running a little card dead. And if you're quiet, nobody's going to notice. So, good players will adjust their play to compensate for your frustration, if you have it, and how things are going. You won't be able to see this. Bad players will find you unlucky, and they will play slightly more unpredictable versus you. They might bluff the river, they might bluff mini race you, they might change just one usual aspect of their play that forces you to fold a hand that you otherwise would play differently. Winnings go down, tilt goes up. That's just a natural thing that happens. Ego has a big part to play with this. If you have a big ego, remove it from the game. The bigger ego you have, the more tilt you will have. Frustration can lead to exploitation from good opponents. I said this previously before. So, what determines a high Mojo Factor? And I think I just talked about this. Have you been winning? Have you been lucky? Do you have a huge stack from your winnings? No one has seen your cards in your winning? Opponents fear you? That's a double plus. Then you have a good Mojo Factor, baby. But whatever you do, keep an eye on how the table is perceiving you. Now, this kind of stuff does not affect everybody, does not affect everybody all the time. There'll be some players that are just totally clueless about this and not even realize they're watching a TV game, or they just don't care. But there will be some that this will affect, and you got to pay attention to it. I've had many live games where just everything went my way, and people were terrified to play against me. And I made a lot of money that night. I made more bluffs. I did really well. So then there were other games where it was just the opposite, where they just never believed me, and I never caught anything, and my tilt and frustration went up. So it works both ways. At the table, of course this is a live table. Playing only one table means that people notice the action, even bad players. It's not like you're playing 10 online where everything's going on everywhere around you. People do notice everything that you do. And again, it's not everybody. It might be some and not others. Abuse your Mojo Factor if it's high. Take your time on decisions. Always be aware of your persona and Mojo Factor, and we're going to talk about persona next. Persona comes from my first video that was basically a summary of everything, of the videos that I'm making now. Be aware of other players' mental states and how it changes their play. Some guy could be doing okay and suddenly take a bad beat or two in a row, and suddenly their whole mental state changes, and that's exploitable. Change tables if things are turning sour and your Mojo Factor is going down or is low. It's at least take a break. You know, stop what you're doing, take a break, get some fresh air, and maybe come back. Really, the best thing to do is change tables. When you change tables, what that does is that basically removes all your prejudices toward players, all your sights toward other players. It just resets you to zero. And you go sit at another table, nobody knows you, you don't know them, and you start afresh all over, and your brain resets, and you could start playing again. So that's what it does. Your appearance. People underestimate this also. How do you look? What are you wearing? How you're acting, based on your nationality, your dress, your physical size, your race. Are you a bad boy, a good Samaritan? You sit down and you're dressed like a priest. Are you intimidating? Are you invisible? All of these things affect how people look at you. Human beings are naturally prejudiced. They're afraid of the unknown, and they have their built-in prejudices against the way that different people look and different people are. You know, let's say that you're an Indian player. You sit down at a table. You might have a guy on the other side that only looks at Indians as engineers and tech support at a help desk, and that they're very narrow vision. So his perception of you is exactly that way. So keep this in mind if you're a young kid and you want to sit down with a rapper t-shirt on and a big gold chain and sunglasses and a hat worn backwards and a tattoo across your face or whatever you do. Realize that people are going to look at you a certain way and they're going to make certain assumptions about you. So keep all this in mind. One thing I could tell you about appearance is if you dress, try to dress neutral. You don't, unless you're trying to do something purposeful. Don't try to be flamboyant or this, that, and the other, or dull looking. Don't dress in a tie. I would dress comfortable and with neutral colors, not to give away anything. And that's actually for my next video. But anyways, so really the best, for me personally, the best way to come to a table is to have a neutral appearance. Your personality. This affects things also. What kind of person are you? Do you have high presence? Are you outgoing, friendly, charismatic, smooth, friendly, conversationalist? Are you leader? Are you charming? I have a friend of mine that this guy can do no wrong. He's a big football type player. Right now he's fairly overweight, but he could talk about dog shit and you will just listen. This is how charismatic this guy is. He's got a great, fantastic personality. If you don't like this guy, there is something wrong with you. In reality, he's actually a very, very nice guy. Very personable. It's great to hang around him. He's funny. He's just a great guy. So his personality is on the high presence. I mean, if he's at a poker table, I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't like him. Low presence. You know, just because you're not charismatic and charming doesn't mean anything. You can be shy, quiet, awkward. You mumble. Sometimes I do. You could be clumsy, be a follower, have aberrant behavior, undistinguished. All these things are fine. Just make a realization of who you are. Even with the low presence, if you're shy and quiet, that actually kind of works for you because nobody pays attention to you. But be aware if you are awkward. I'm not awkward. Some people are. Some people are just, it's very hard for them to make friends because their behavior and who they are is just so, just enough off the normal path that people look at them with prejudice. So be aware of your personality and how it works. Again, other considerations. People identify personalities with race, nationality, dress, and physical size. Might affect how others perceive how you play. So, like a lot of general consensus is that African Americans are looser, and that Caucasians are tighter. I mean, these are just assumptions. So, be very aware of yourself. Live table persona. I think this is actually a very fun topic that not many people have touched upon. Each type of table persona impacts the game and your play. So I put some very obvious names up here that you are all familiar with. A friendly persona, Daniel Negreanu. An intimidating persona, Antanas Guoga. I don't know if I'm butchering that name or not, but he's known as Tony G. And then a neutral or quiet persona, which is Gus Hansen. Don't try to display a persona that you're not comfortable doing. So if you're a very quiet person that's very non-confrontational, it'll be very hard for you to put forth an intimidating persona. If you have a high squeaky voice, I'm sorry, it's just really not going to work. So pay attention to who you are and how you are and see if you can adapt any of these. Each persona has an advantage and disadvantages, so we're going to look at them. Friendly persona. The behavior is that you treat everybody well. You're happy, you're talkative, you're charismatic, people like you naturally, you make friends at the table, you get people to talk to you. Oh, it's awesome. Players tend to talk to you. Players might play soft against you, especially if you're a woman. They tend to give you information, and one of the best things about the friendly persona is that it keeps you positive. If you're being social at the table, which is part of live poker, then you're keeping yourself positive by positive conversation. You want to try to avoid debates, by the way, political debates, religious debates, stay out of those. But friendly persona is generally like this. Daniel Negreanu is a perfect example of friendly persona. You've seen a lot of videos that people just give him information. Say, here you go, and they land on his lap, and he can figure out what their play is. Disadvantages. It makes focusing more difficult because you're being social. You're not totally focusing on the game. You're focusing on other issues, so you might miss something across on the other side of the table. If you're having a conversation out of a hand with somebody else and they're talking back to you, you might miss an important tell of somebody or an important play that somebody else is making during the hand. And also, you might give information away with a friendly persona. You might be talking, accidentally let something slip out about yourself or something about what you do or how you think. So be very careful. But it's a very positive, good emotion, a good way to play, good persona to play. I figured that D'Angelo from Elements of Poker would totally approve of this kind of persona. Intimidating persona. This is Tony G, and everybody knows who he is. His behavior is talks a lot, insults or belittles players, walks a fine line between ethics and rules, possibly angle shooting, physically passive-aggressive, and intimidation. Now, I'm not saying that Tony G is all these things, but all these things fall under this category. So we'll go down these list of behaviors. Talks a lot. Basically is trying to throw off his opponents and force them in one decision or another. Insults or belittles. Same thing, trying to get them on tilt. So walks the fine line between ethics and rules. That's something that's a good skill to have if you want to play this type of persona, where you know just to insult somebody enough where they're not going to call the floorman, but enough that they will get pissed. Angle shooting, and I'll give an example of angle shooting that we had at a live table a few weeks ago. One gentleman was in a hand in the river, and he bets, and the other guy that was the angle shooter says, okay, let's see it. I got a straight. And he didn't say call, and he didn't flip over his hand. And the other guy almost folded. So, because he didn't have a straight. So this is called angle shooting. And while technically it's not illegal, it's really unethical. Physically passive-aggressive. Physically passive-aggressive is basically things like leaning into somebody else's space, putting your elbow on their side where they're squeezed in. It tilts them a little bit more. And intimidation kind of falls under the same thing, where you could be physically intimidating, passively intimidating, I mean, with your words, and forcing them to be in uncomfortable situations. So what's the advantages of an intimidating personality if it isn't obvious to you? It puts some players on tilt, like monkey tilt. Some players might play scared against you. People that have very passive personalities, very quiet personalities, might start getting scared. They might start shaking. It might cause a negative chemical reaction in their bodies of fight or flight. And usually for that type of person, it's flight. For other people, it'll be fight. But either way, if it goes in either direction, it causes those bad chemicals to pop up in their body and causes them to play bad. A rush of adrenaline is not good for the brain, unless you're physically in those situations where your life is threatened. Players might be out to get you, which means tilt, and they might make a play, and if you're really good and observant, you might catch them and force them to make some really, really bad bluff against you. Increases the chances that players will make mistakes in any form, either passively or actively. They might play scared and play weak tight. They might try to bluff you off of hands when you got the nuts. Basically, you're making players feel uncomfortable at the table. The disadvantages. Negative emotion. It takes a lot of energy to play this style. A lot of negative emotion. It takes away from focus. It might force you down into a negative state of mind, so you really have to rework how your brain processes, how you think to counteract this and find ways to calm yourself. Increases variance, of course, as players play unpredictable. But of course, as variance increases, so does your profit. May increase your own tilt. An example would be if you try a trick play and somebody nails you on it and catches on to what you're doing, you look like a fool at the table. You got to remove your ego from the game, and this is one of the reasons. The situation occurs like this, you have to know, and you're playing this personality, just to brush it off. Say, okay, you caught me, no big deal, next hand, and just let it go. If you want an excellent example of this type of personality, I have a link there, the big game on PokerStars.net. Season 1, Episode 9, Minute 13. There's a hand between Roble and Tony G, and watch the whole hand. You can pause the video, go look at it, and you'll see a perfect example of an intimidating personality. It's really, really well done. So, let's move on. Neutral or quiet persona. This is more like Gus Hansen. If you ever notice him playing in tournaments, he doesn't say much, he doesn't talk much, he focuses completely on the game, and even in his own books, he says he does this so he can completely focus on the game and focus on the play. And, you know, he doesn't really read that much tells or poker psychology, but he focuses on the game. Now, of course, he could be fibbing there, and he actually does pay attention to this and doesn't want other people to know. So, what's that behavior entitled? You don't speak at the table, you don't react, you focus on the game. You're totally just neutral. You're just there to play, and you pay attention. The advantages are that it allows greater focus on the game. Gives off less tells generally. If you're quiet and calm and stable, you're generally going to give off less tilt. Reduces tilt. It can reduce tilt. I think it would. Disadvantages. Might be difficult to maintain boredom. I see a lot of players, they say that being a live pro is so unbelievably boring at the table. I can't stand it. I'd rather play 8 tables online than play 1 table live. I want to slip my wrist. Well, that's because it's a social aspect and you're a math player and you need that kind of focus. If you're more of an instinct or feel or social player, then you will love live games. I've seen a lot of players that are live players. Of course, I love live play over online. I get to talk to people. I get to chit chat. I get to find out what's going on. I get to watch some sports. I get to do this. I think it's awesome. It's much better. Personally, I could sit at a live table for 8 hours. I could play. I only play 1-hour sessions online, so I find live much more interesting and relaxing. Second part, live poker turns into a grind without using the social aspect of the game, which this all comes down to your personality also, to figure out what's best for you. But this is neutral or quiet persona, so you have an idea of how it works. And Gus Hansen is the example. Poker radar. This is something new that I added. This is conversations with others for information. Now, what you're basically doing is getting them to talk about themselves, getting them to talk about anything that will give you information about how they are and how they play. Talk to other players to figure out who they are. Do they feel well? Are they ready to play? What's their method of thinking? How are they feeling physically? I mean, all these things. How's their life going? Manipulation. Use the table talk to drive attention towards you or away, depending on whatever you want. Suggesting a course of action subtly. Here's an example of one. I was in a tournament a number of years ago, and I had a hand which I was check raised all in on the turn, and it made totally no sense to me. But it was a bad player, and I couldn't pick up any reads on him, any tells. I haven't played with him long enough. And sadly, I only had king high because initially I read him this week. And I'm trying to figure out what he is. Couldn't get any info on him. And I'm formulating all the hands. And I said, I'm going to take a shot. And I said, well, I really think you have a draw. And I go to reach my chips. And immediately, this guy starts blabbing like he's a stool pigeon just got caught in a crime. And that gave me an idea of that my read was right on him. So this is an exact example of how Poker Radar can get you information. And if any of you know what radar is sending out a signal and getting a ping back, and you receive that signal back when the ping hits something, and you find out where it is. So this is Poker Radar. You want to trick an observant opponent into thinking you play differently. A good example would be of this. You purposely talk about a hand, but you switch your tactic, and you talk about it to somebody near you, but you talk about it just enough where this other guy can hear you. Now, this is something that is really complex and difficult to do. You have to know that your opponent is capable of this level of thinking. You have to know that he's capable of listening, that he plays as well as you do, he pays attention like you do, and that you can get this off. You can also create tilt in others. And here's an example of it. Another tournament, this is a super satellite for a WPT that I played in. We had myself and 7 other bad players at the table and 1 pretty good table. And this guy played an intimidating personality. And he used his Poker Radar to set the whole table on tilt. And he basically racked up all their chips. Sadly, I was immediately on his right. But he did an amazing job of just tilting people with simple things that he said. One guy makes a play at him and he shoves all in and he falls and really sarcastic and says, "You people never believe me." And I could see the steam coming off that player's head, and shortly afterwards he tilted the rest of the stack away. So these type of things, really, it's amazing what you could do with it. Force a tell. This was my example that I said before. A single comment may reveal an unseen tell, or something that wasn't given off before. And this, of course, will apply to bad players. Good players will rarely give off a tell. Poker Sonar. Now, Sonar is listening for anything that's making sound. So this is not the opposite of Poker Radar, but this is about paying attention. Watch and listen to others' conversations. Hand storage. Yes, hand storage are boring. Bad beat storage are boring. But you can gain a lot of information from them if you start asking the right questions in the middle of a hand. Remember, people love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about what a genius they are in a hand, or how they got tricked and how this horrible donkey bad beat them. So pay attention. They might give off a clue in their style of play when they talk about a hand, indicate how they are. They're frustrated right now. Are they physically tired? Like, oh, I'm tired of playing, I want to go. Just pay attention and listen. You don't have to be talking to them directly, but listen across the room. They could be talking to somebody else. Allow an identification of a tell. Now, how is this possible? Well, people, when they're out of a situation at a poker table or out of a hand, they don't keep their guard up. So you might get an indication of how they play, things they might give off. Like, for example, you have a player that when he's listening, he tilts his head when he's listening and contemplating something. And maybe you see the same pattern at the table, and you realize that he only does this at the table when he has a weak hand. So this is an example of something. So people can give off a tell. They're not protecting their tells when they're just talking to somebody normally. So you could also tell if he's a very excitable person, if he uses his hands or not. So these are all things that help. You can identify even information for another player. He's not even, the two people that are talking, they're talking about somebody else, and you can pick up an important piece of information about another player, a third player. And this information should almost always be true, because they're not going to make up something bad, some lie, and be this tricky about somebody else. So this could be a piece of information that you can use. Social conversation. You can pick up on the career of the person. If the guy's an engineer or astrophysicist or something like that, this guy is very math-oriented, and he's going to think on those lines. If this guy's a singer, an actor, painter, that he's more of an instinctual or field player, so he's going to think playing those lines. What are their life troubles? It may indicate stress. If they're going through a hard time in their life, when they play poker, they have things in the back of their mind and they're not focusing on the game. Are these people leaving from the table? Are they coming in? Time of departure. It might give you an indication of this, so you can convince a really bad player that has been just stacking up the chips to stay longer. And of course, by being friendly to him and entertaining him is the way that you do it. So these are all things that come out of a social conversation. Associates. Who do they talk to? Who do they hang with? Type of groups that they hang around with will give you an indication of how they play and how they think. If they hang around with a bunch of other bad players, this guy's not very good. But usually this is going to apply when you see a player that hangs around with good players. That way, if you see one person hanging around with a bunch of other regs that that are loose aggressive, their general tendency is to play loose aggressive, and they're tough, and they're this, that, and the other, and this one guy's unknown, well, now probably his tendency is going to be to play like them. So if you know them, you will know how he is. Don'ts and do's at the table. Don't talk about your hands. Don't mention you play online. Don't insult and berate other players in a hand. Now, this all is situational compared to the persona that you have. But one thing you do want to notice, that out of a hand, Tony G, which is a perfect example of an intimidating personality, says, hey, it's nothing personal. Like in the example I gave before, the link, at the end of it, he says, this is only poker. It's nothing personal. And he's very nice out of a hand. That's a very important key to note. So if you want to be a jerk out of a hand, that's your option. I don't think it's necessary. You could be a jerk during a hand and during play, because people know poker's for money. And also, there's something else about when a hand is over and the stress is over, and then he says, it's nothing personal. Well, this is what happens. The other player, suddenly in this enormous amount of stress, whatever, if he did the wrong or right play, and he's so mad at the intimidating player. Now this guy says, look, it's nothing personal. And now this first player feels like an idiot. He's like, yes, of course, this is poker, this is money. And now it totally slams his emotion of anger in another direction and just sends a jolt through his body. So that can affect his play in a different way. So now this guy calms down. Another hand comes into play. The intimidating player starts again on him in the middle of the pot. Well, now, boom, it jolts him in the other direction. And this big, huge seesaw can really confuse the brain. So it's very, very interesting tactics. But Tony G is actually very nice outside the table. Don't show physical frustration. These are obviously tilt marks. Don't whine at the table about anything. Oh, this bad beat. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Don't whine about it. Oh, the waitress. Oh, the dealer. Nobody wants to hear a whiner. Nobody cares to. Don't talk about your life that indicates how you think or who you are or what you do. If you want to answer something, then I'm sure everybody's done multiple jobs, and say what you've done. Oh yeah, I've been technical support. I've been in sales. I've done both. I did some video graphics for people. All these different things that don't give a clue exactly if you're one way or another. Don't talk about your problems. Don't talk about your problems with your girlfriends at home. Don't talk about any of this stuff. Leave it off the table. Number one, it puts you in a negative frame of mind. Number two, it lets people try to exploit you. Remember, human beings fear the unknown. If you are an unknown player at the table, they won't know what to do. If they can figure you out, then they can adjust their strategy to fight you at the table. Now, mind you, is that they might adjust their strategy in the wrong direction, but you might not realize this. Most players are only level 2 thinkers, even good players. It's very rarely that you see somebody level 3 or level 4 players. Of course, bad players are usually level 1 at best, level 2 players. Don't draw attention to your bad mojo. That's definitely a no-no. If you're running bad, you're taking bad beats, you took a huge bad beat, be friendly, tell jokes, be always kind and courteous, say something funny, draw the attention away from bad mojo. You definitely do not want that kind of publicity. So, let's take a look at the summary psychology, since this is just about the end of this video. Be observant to your surroundings and people. Gain as much information about others. Let them talk. Remember, their ego is huge. They want to talk about themselves. Don't reveal any information about yourself. Understand the benefits and the detriments of your persona and how to use them effectively. And use a persona that fits how you are. Use your Mojo Factor to your advantage, and know when your Mojo Factor sucks and people are noticing it to take a break or change tables. Change your environment when tilting or have a low Mojo Factor. Start at least by changing tables or taking a break. Passively listen to those around you. Understand how others will judge you, how you seem to others. Be nice to casino staff and be generous. One other note, if you really have somebody that's just totally ignoring you, then just be polite, and you don't have to tip them extra. Just tip them normal if it's totally ineffective, and it happens. Everybody falls generally in the middle, but you do have some extremes on both ends. Follow my discipline suggestions in my other video for 100% brain efficiency, brain and body efficiency. Very, very important. All these things between the two videos I've said so far are itty-bitty increments, tiny percentage points. Even half a percentage point, a quarter of a percentage point, that affects all your play. But when you add up 20 different individual tiny factors, this equals to more money per hour. I guarantee it. It just does. So open up your mind and go over this and really, really think about this. If you have any problems, meet somebody else that's a field player. If you're a math player, talk to somebody that's a field player or an instinct player and ask them and talk to them about this video and see what they think. Get opinions from many people. This is how I think, and this is what I focus on. Recommended books. This is for psychology. It's a lot of the books that I had on before. Elements of Poker by Tommy Angelo. Or is it D'Angelo? I forgot. He focuses on being a good person, being a good human being. You should be a good human being to other people because they're human beings and need to be treated that way. Ace on the River, Barry Greenstein, focuses on you are there to entertain the bad players. So entertain them. You are getting paid to make them smile and laugh. So keep them there, entertain them, and make more money, and be aware of bad situations around you. Tao Poker, Inside, that's a book that I haven't read much. I didn't like it, but for some people it works. Ace on the River worked for me. Inside the Poker Mind by John Feeney, excellent book about table psychology, and of course Psychology of Poker by Sklansky. So focus on those things. What's coming up next? Other videos. This has changed a little bit from my last one. Connecting the Body and Mind is a whole series. Discipline was part 1. This was Poker Psychology part 2. Body Language and Tells is part 3. I'm sure some of you are excited about that, and some of you are like, whatever. And then a 4th video that's totally separate from this, and I changed what I was going to call it. No Limit Thinking for the Instinct Player, because I know that some people, they have a hard time grasping the complicated math, and they need something a little bit more touchy-feely to maybe logical or whatever, to visual maybe, to go through a hand. So I'm going to try to develop a video for this on basically how you should think through a hand. Donations. Making videos like this take time, take a lot of effort, a lot of research. It's a culmination of about right now 7 years of poker play live and online for me. So any donations would be helpful. I'm Fuzzypup on the Merge Network, and I'm whoops, didn't fix that again. Fuzzypuppoker@gmail.com. So I gotta fix that. Any type of donations would be great. Anything of $25 or more, I will be happy to spend an hour on the phone with you and talk about any of this stuff. meet you somewhere, take a look at your tells if you live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Anything that I can observe and learn only teaches myself along with you. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and you all have a good time at the tables, and good luck.